my dear friends and net aspirants, welcome back to High Point again. So, how all are you doing? I hope you are in a very fast manner. You are going and you are doing all your devices and everything for your UGC NET JRF exam, and you are great in your life as well. So, yeah, we have already seen the part one of important and previous questions related to literary criticism. So, like you can see, this is the part second of important and previous questions related to literary criticism. So far, we have seen many questions related to many other sessions of NTA UGC NET like drama, poetry, fiction, non-fiction, and all. Then, with this video, we will finish with the literary criticism. Next, we will have literary theory and also cultural studies. So I think these series of videos about important and previous questions related to various topics of literature. I mean, this will be a real help for you. I hope so. So, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel, and also you can find me in these platforms. My website is here www.highpoint.in. You can Google it and easily find it out, and there you will get immense and ample materials for UGC NET JRF English language and literature, and also practice and previous question papers, all from previous question papers I have included from 2004 to the recent one, so you can go. And if you want any help regarding NTA UGC NET about the topics, the if you want to have your own timetable and all, such kind of the strategies to learn and all, then you can obviously call me and WhatsApp me in this given number in the screen. And let's move on without wasting time. Okay, so we have seen 35 questions in the previous part 1 of the video. So we will begin with the 36th question here. So the question is, there neither is nor can be any essential difference between the language of prose and dash. See, from this sentence, from this question, here is a statement in this question, and you have to fill the blank. But when you read this statement itself, you have to understand, you have to identify that this statement is from the preface to Lyrical Ballads by Wordsworth, in which he talks about the literature, the language suitable for poetry, and he makes a comparison between the language of prose and language of poetry. So here, what is the suitable word that you have to identify? Poetry, poetic composition, verse, none of these. But the correct answer is option C, verse. So Wordsworth says that, see, there is no essential difference. There is no base difference between language of prose and language of verse. We are using the same sort of language, but the difference is only that, in while we are composing a verse form, we will add add rhymes, and we will add much more kind of figurative speech and all, devices such as we will use, nothing else. We are using the same language. Next question, who says that every great poet is a teacher? See, again, this sentence is also from the preface by Wordsworth for Lyrical Ballads. So who says that every great poet is a teacher? It is Wordsworth. So in that preface, not only he talks about his new kind of poetry, his Coleridge's and his new point kind of poetry, but also he talks about and defines poetry, and also talks about the language of poetry, makes comparisons, and also defines and talks about poet, who is a poet. So in that section, he says that every great poet is a teacher. Next, who remarks that there abide there three, Aristotle, Longinus, and Coleridge. Again, this is a statement made about, some person made about Coleridge, Aristotle, and Longinus. There abide there three, Aristotle, Longinus, and Coleridge. So this statement was made by Sainsbury, a critic known as Sainsbury. Next question, Wordsworth says that poetry is the breadth and dash of knowledge. Again, Wordsworth says that poetry is the, again, this is one of the definitions that Wordsworth gives about poetry. Poetry is the breadth and dash of the knowledge. So, spirit of all knowledge. Poetry is the breadth and spirit of the knowledge. Next question, what according to Wordsworth is the worst of all the diseases which have afflicted English poetry? So what according to Wordsworth is the worst of all the diseases which have afflicted English poetry. So basically, Wordsworth actually cites and he points out one of the major, you know, not so good practice happening in poetry in the then English poetry of Wordsworth contemporary times. So so about it he calls it as a disease, a worst kind of disease that affected English poetry. So what is that? False poetic diction. So usage of false poetic diction or far-fetched diction, or kind of such stylistic dictions and all, that is the worst kind of disease which have afflicted the then English poetry according to Wordsworth. Next question: in how many parts in the essay traditional and individual talent divided? Who has written traditional and individual talent? Traditional and individual talent is written by T.S. Eliot of the modern age. So, how many parts are there for this great critical work, tradition and individual talent? There are three parts for this essay, tradition and individual talent. So in the previous videos, I have given immense details related to this, details related to this critical essay when we were discussing, when we were having questions regarding or questions related to T.S. Eliot. So you can, if you have watched that, you must have, got familiar with that points. In which essay does Eliot explains how the fusion of thought and feeling take place? So in that essay, so, in which essay? Eliot has written many essays, not only tradition and individual talent, but in one of his essays, T.S. Eliot actually explains about how the fusion of thought and feeling take place, how this fusion of thought and feeling take place, about that process. So, which is that essay by Eliot, in which he talks about it. So, which is whether it is on Milton or whether it is in the metaphysical poets or the study of poetry or tradition and individual talent. So Eliot has written all these essays. Okay, please learn these essays, this title as essays written by T.S. Eliot, and in his work, the metaphysical poets. He also has done studies about the metaphysical poets of the 16th century, sorry, 17th century, of the 17th century, and metaphysical, this particular work by T.S. Eliot is one of the reasons how these metaphysical poets revived their importance in the realm of poetry. Okay, so in the essay titled The Metaphysical Poet, he explains, Eliot explains how the fusion of thought and feeling take place. Next, Eliot says poetry is not a turning loose of emotions but an escape from. So, this is a famous quotation, famous statement that we can find in the essay Tradition and Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot. So, we have to fill the blanks. Poetry is not a turning loose of emotions but an escape from emotions. So, he says that it's not that while you write poetry you actually have to lose all your emotions in that poetry and you'd explain about your own mental status in that poetry. But poetry is not, you lose your emotions there, but it is an escape. Poetry is basically an escape from emotion. Next, which work of Eliot is considered to be the manifesto of his critical creed? Okay, so which of his essays is considered to be the manifesto of his kind, the kind of critical critical creed that he was following, or he was doing. Okay, it was tradition and individual talent. Next one, who has criticized the most Eliot's theory of objective correlative? See, Eliot actually brought about a theory of objective correlative. So when he was discussing about Hamlet and all, he actually talked about objective correlative. So he says that there will be many elements and objects will be there. Object in the sense events and characters and the features and many other things in a work that actually brings about the effect of that work. The relation between that objects, that objectives actually brings about the effect and the quality of the work. So that is the sum total of this term objective correlative. Please remember that this particular phrase objective correlative was formed and termed and coined by Eliot. Okay, so who criticized the Eliot theory of objective correlative? So that is the question here. So who criticized Eliot for his theory of objective correlative? Eliseo Vivas. Okay, or Eliseo Vivas. He actually criticized the Eliot's theory of objective relatives, objective correlative. So you have to learn not only that answer, but you have to learn that Eliot is the one who brought about the theory of objective correlative. Next question. Which of the play of Shakespeare does not consider to be an artistic failure? Okay. So according to Eliot, okay, according to Eliot, he says that one of or some of Shakespeare's characters, Shakespeare's plays are artistic failure. They are not failures on the stage, but artistically, if you evaluate, those works are, some of the works are artistic failure. You know, about Shakespeare, he was telling this. So from the given list, which of the play by Shakespeare that Eliot considered to be an artistic failure? So it was Hamlet. So Eliot considered that Hamlet by Shakespeare, that play by Shakespeare, is an artistic failure, not a failure on the stage. Okay, okay, it is an artistic failure according to Eliot. The next question: what, according to Eliot, is the best scene of objective in Shakespeare's Macbeth? So Eliot actually he has done many criticism upon Shakespeare, especially upon Macbeth and Hamlet and his major tragedies. So in Macbeth, he says that one of the scene is the best objective, or which serves as the best objective in that particular Shakespearean play. So which is that particular scene that he was referring in Macbeth? It was this sleepwalking scene. So we can see the sleepwalking scene by Lady Macbeth towards the end of the drama Macbeth. So Lady Macbeth was mentally affected because of the crimes that she has done, and also she could not reveal these crimes to anybody. And after a certain point of time, not only because of that, but after a certain point of time, it is like that Macbeth was not dependent upon his wife Lady Macbeth, and he also went on with his schemes. And also after that first killing of Duncan and his after that he killed the guards, and after that, without consulting Lady Macbeth, he actually continuously he was conducting murders, like a banker, and he even attempted killing Fleance and Macduff's wife and family. So many murderous things and crimes. So Lady Macbeth could not hold all these crimes inside her heart, and that actually caused her mental insanity, and she was walking all the night with a candle in her hands, and she continuously washing her hand to remove the blood stains that she feels that she has on her hand. So in that way, the sleepwalking scene happens. So according to Eliot, that is the best scene of objective in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Next question: which magazine did he work first as editor? He means Eliot. Okay, so we are talking, we are having questions related to Eliot only. So which magazine did Eliot work first as editor? So he worked in many magazines and all, but for the first time as an editor, he worked in which magazine? So it was in Egoist. So he worked as an editor for the first time for the magazine Egoist. Next one, who introduced the term asemplastic in agnation? So this is a particular term who introduced it. Coleridge introduced it. It is not that popular, but still Coleridge also said about primary imagination, secondary imagination, fancy and imagination. He distinguished, and again he actually introduced a term known as asemplastic in agnation. Asemplastic in agnation. So this was introduced by Coleridge. Next one, who wrote the comment that fancy is the arbitrary to bring together of things that lie remote and forming them into a unity. So when it is about fancy, who is the one who talked about fancy and imagination more in this particular given list? So it was Coleridge. So in that way, you can actually arrive at correct answer, even though you don't know particularly that this statement is said or done by Coleridge. But from the given list, Dryden versus Coleridge, Arnold, you can best identify, you can easily identify that Coleridge is the one who talked about, who distinguished fancy and imagination, and who talked about fancy and imagination elaborately in his work Biographia Literaria. So this statement about fancy was also said by Coleridge. The next question: in which essay Arnold defines poetry as a criticism of life under the conditions fixed for such a criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty? So often the question I have seen in previous questions several times, that who said criticism is criticism of life, you know, a criticism of life. Who talked about, who defines poetry as a criticism of life? Okay, so often questions like that I have seen in previous question papers. So it was Arnold who says this. So in which essay he defines poetry as the criticism of life under the conditions fixed for such a criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. So it was in his the study of poetry. So Arnold has written an essay known as The Study of Poetry. In this particular essay, Arnold defines poetry as the criticism of life. Next one: in which essay of T.S. Eliot has developed dissociation of sensibility occurs? This is another phrase that was introduced by Eliot, that is dissociation of sensibility. So in his The Metaphysical Poets, when he was explaining about the metaphysical conceit and other features of metaphysical poetry, he developed this term, this phrase known as dissociation of sensibility, in order to explain the poetic quality of metaphysical poets. So in his essay, Eliot's essay, The Metaphysical Poets, he developed dissociation of sensibility, that phrase. So about Eliot, we have to remember objective, correlative and dissociation of sensibility. Next, who according to T.S. Eliot has developed unified sensibility? So in referring to a particular group, a particular age of writers, or a writers of a particular age, Eliot says that, see, this group of writers or writers belong to this particular age in English literature. They developed, or they had a unified sensibility. So it was the Elizabethans and Jacobeans, or the 16th century and 17th century. It's like first half of the first, almost the first half of the uh, 17th century and 16th century. They are Elizabethans and Jacobeans, right? Or first quarter of the 17th century, we can say. See, the Elizabethan age and Jacobean age together, it is from 1550 to 1625. So the writers belong to that particular age, that particular time period. They developed a unified sensibility according to T.S. Eliot. Next, who among the following is the pioneer of new criticism? Okay, new criticism is a critical theory that we can find in the 20th century. And who is the pioneer of new criticism? It was Ayer Richards. Ayer Richards is the pioneer of new criticism. About new criticism and all, we will discuss elaborately in literary theory and all. We will see more questions from this there. Next question: the Principles of Literary Criticism is written by. So this is a work, this is a book by whom? The Principles of Literary Criticism. So since in literary criticism, Ayer Richards is the pioneer one, he is the one who has written this particular work too, The Principles of Literary Criticism. The next question: who calls F.R. Lewis a practical critic? So F.R. Lewis belonged to practical criticism, and which other critic uh, calls F.R. Lewis as a practical critic? Lawrence Lerner, a critic known as Lawrence Lerner, called F.R. Lewis as a practical critic. Next question: which of the following book introduced the term new criticism? Okay, see, Ayer Richardson was the pioneer in new criticism, and he also has done this particular book also has written this particular work, The Principles of Literary Criticism. But actually, who introduced the term new criticism, or which of the book introduced the term new criticism? Okay, or we can see another type of question can be asked for the same answer. Now, who actually wrote the book known as the New Criticism? It was not I.A. Richards. It is Joe Go Ransom, the New Criticism. John Go Ransom's The New Criticism. So don't go confused. The pioneer in New Criticism is I.A. Richards. And I.A. Richards has written the principles of New Criticism. Okay. But Ransom is the one who wrote the work which is titled as The New Criticism, and it introduced the term New Criticism for the first time. Okay. Don't go confused. Pause the video and learn. You can learn this from this question. F.R. Lewis has written The Great Tradition, T.S. Eliot has written The Sacred Wood, John Go Ransom has written The New Criticism. Okay, you can learn from this. Pause the video and learn all these titles and their authors, because questions can ask directly who has written this particular work. The Great Tradition is written by F.R. Lewis, and he is a practical critic. Okay, so yeah. From the question itself, you can learn many things. Next question. A poem should not mean but be is found in. So, this is a quotation. A poem should not mean but be. This particular statement is found in which work? So, this particular statement we can find in William Emerson's Seven Types of Ambiguity. So, this is one of the famous kind of work that we can find in 20th century criticism. William Emerson's Seven Type of Ambiguity, in which he discusses about seven type of ambiguity that we can find in your work, and other options. From other options also we can learn. William K. Wimsatt has written the verbal ion, then verbal icon. Okay, it is not verbal ion, it's verbal icon, the verbal icon. Then MC Beardsley is the international fallacy. Then these two words and their authors you can obviously learn from this question. The next question. Historically, post-structuralism had its origin in. So if you see history, if you see the past decades, so in which age you can absolutely say that post-structuralism origin or post-structuralism took its origin. Okay, it is in October 1966. At least remember that this year 1966. Often, questions to ask you to arrange things in chronologically. Often it is asking. So in there you can. I have seen that they have asked about many literary theories or many literary criticism. Schools of criticism and theory happened in the 20th century, and you have to arrange them chronologically. So in that way, if you know the origin of something, as the at least you have an idea about the ages and decades in which certain schools developed and all, then it will be very easy for you to arrange them chronologically. Okay. Next, identify the correct group of the exponents of the reader response theory or the reception theory. So, reader response theory is also known as reception theory. You have to identify the exponents, the major group of critics belong to this particular theory. So, the answer is E.D. Hirsch, Stanley Fish, Petronicia P. Shearscott, Jonathan Culler. So at least remember that Stanley Fish and Jonathan Culler, these two people, we can see them. They are great exponents of reader response theory and the reception theory. Next, who pleaded for high seriousness in literature? Who pleaded for high seriousness in literature? Matthew Arnold. Actually, Matthew Arnold belongs to the Victorian age, and he mainly talks about high seriousness. He brings about this particular term known as high seriousness, by which he means that, see, and he also says that Chaucer lacked the high seriousness, even though he is a good writer and all, but he lacks high seriousness, and many more others he cites there. And Matthew Arnold, by saying that high seriousness means that you have to have an elevated style of writing, kind of epic kind of style that you must in selection of diction themes and all those things. You have to follow a high seriousness that is lacking in Chaucer. So he pleaded for, Matthew Arnold pleaded for high seriousness in literature. Next one, who said preface to lyrical ballads explains the poetic process of the type of poetry only Wordsworth wrote. Okay, this is a kind of criticism that whoever said it made against Wordsworth, and he says that, see, we can see a poetic process, an explanation about poetic process and about poetry and poetic language in preface to lyrical ballads. That is no doubt. There is no doubt about it. But you know, and preface is written by Wordsworth. So he mainly talks about the poetic process, the poetic language, the poetic diction, and everything related to poetry that Wordsworth has done. You cannot generalize it. So who said such a kind of impression? Who shared such a kind of opinion about Wordsworth preface to lyrical ballad? So it was I. Richards. Higher Church belongs to New Criticism. So he said that, the preface actually explains the poetic process of the type of poetry, a kind of variety or a particular kind of poetry that Wordsworth has written. You cannot imply the same say, poetic process, or employ the same theories that Wordsworth says in lyrical ballads in every other poetry. Okay, so it's simply about the poetic process that happened behind the type of poetry that Wordsworth has written, not to everyone. Then, next question, Johnson's phrase, Fatal Cleopatra, refers to Shakespeare. See, Fatal Cleopatra, this phrase was brought by Samuel Johnson of the Neoclassical age, and, in reference to Shakespeare's, Shakespeare's quality, or Shakespeare's negative or positive quality, one of the qualities, Johnson actually made this, or, coined this phrase known as Fatal Cleopatra. So, in reference to which quality, or which negative or positive quality that Shakespeare, that Johnson made or referred to this particular, or made this particular phrase. So, in his, you know, preface to Shakespeare, so Johnson has written preface to Shakespeare. So, in which he actually talks merits and demerits of Shakespeare. So, as a demerit of Shakespeare's works, compositions, he says that Shakespeare had a fondness of puns. So, unnecessarily, without seeing the occasion of its use, he uses puns, word plays, and fibbles more and more in his comedies and tragedies. So that, referring to that fondness of puns by Shakespeare that we can see in his plays, he uses the phrase fatal Cleopatra. Next question. The term postmodernism was first used in connection with. So postmodernism is a term, and in in what connection it was first used? So connecting, or in connection with what postmodernism was first used? So in connection with the painting, in reference to the art form painting, postmodernism was first used. That you can see in modern and postmodern times, surrealism, imagism, and many other schools of paintings affected and contributed and you know introduced many things to literature as well. So many movements that developed in painting later reflected in literature as well. So postmodernism in connection with the painting was first used. Next question, Wordsworth has not only sight but insight. Who said this statement? So Wordsworth has not only sight but insight. See, pause the video and just repeat these statements that we can see in various questions. So repeat that statement and also learn who said, and in connection with whom also a person says these statements. Otherwise, simply listening to what I am saying and simply reading and just skipping the video won't work for you. So just pause the video. It will take only 2 to 3 seconds, right? So Wordsworth has not only sight but insight. So this is a statement about Wordsworth, of course. But who said this statement? It was Long. A critic known as Long said this. The next one, who is stated to have said criticism is the art of interpreting art. So about criticism, about poetry, about poet, about literary process or creative process, many definitions are given. So one of the definitions about criticism is there. Is it? Uh, yeah, it is criticism is the art of interpreting art. Who stated this? So it was Walter Pater. Walter Pater, he is the great essayist, and he said that criticism is the art of interpreting art. Next. Who wrote, when a poet's mind is perfectly equipped amalgamating human experience? So who wrote this particular statement? This is not a full statement. So a part of statement is given when a poet's mind is perfectly equipped amalgamating human experience. So it was T.S. Eliot when he was explaining about the impersonality of poetry, impersonality of poem. He discusses that he explains about a particular human or poet's mental status that is fully perfectly equipped to amalgamate human experience. Okay, so it was by T.S. Eliot. The next question we have, D.H. Lawrence was a pioneer of, see the options, stream of consciousness novel, psychoanalytical fiction, psychological fiction, imagist fiction. So we may either go, there is any chance that after reading this we may go for psychological fiction or psychoanalytical fiction, because his Sons and Lovers and many other works, they are mainly studied for Oedipus complex and all. So but he has not written psychological or psychoanalytical fiction. He is a pioneer of stream of consciousness novel, and stream of consciousness is a particular technique that we can see especially in the modern novels. And stream of consciousness was popularized and immensely used and uh, made famous by Virginia Woolf and James Joyce. Both of them are modern poets, modern uh, novelist. So D.H. Lawrence was also a pioneer in stream of consciousness novel, not psychological fiction, not psychological fiction, but later his novels were studied based on psychological theories and all. Okay, especially Oedipus complex and all. The next question, who said language is primarily an auditory system of symbols? You have to identify who said this statement about language. Okay, so who said language is primarily an auditory system of symbols? It was Sapir. Sapir made this statement about language, saying that language is primarily an auditory system of symbols. Next question, according to Dryden, comedy begets malicious pleasure, according to Dryden. Okay, Dryden is also a very great critic of the Restoration period, and he has written works such as the Dramatic Posse, Essay upon Dramatic Posse, and Essay on Fables, and many more works. He is a true representative of the age of Restoration, and also he is the first official royal poet laureate. Okay, that I hope you remember that point. So, Dryden, according to Dryden, comedy begets malicious pleasure. So, that's all about the major important previous questions related to literary criticisms. I hope these 75 questions, when you go through all these 75 questions and their options, you have got some idea and some points related to literary criticism, the works that you have to remember, the persons that you have to remember, and the major quotations and statements and phrases and terms that these important literary critics have came up with. So I hope this was a real help for you when we are immediately preparing for UGC NET JRF exams and all. If you have liked this video, please press the like button, and most importantly, if you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel, and also visit my website known as www.highpoint.in, and also take the free trial and have demo materials, and you can see what we have given there. So that's all. You can also join a WhatsApp group. I have given the link in the description box. There you can click and join the WhatsApp group. There you will get daily quizzes and questions, and also materials and updates and news related to UGC NET English. And also you can follow me in my Instagram for more reels and short videos and notes related to UGC NET JRF English. So that's all about it. Let me meet you in the next video. Until then, bye bye and thank you.